3, 2, 1. Okay, you can start.
Okay. A very warm good evening to our dear distinguished panelists, respected principals of St. Anthony's College, Shillong, and Loyola College, William Nagar, members of the organizing team and technical teams, and all of you esteemed participants. We shall begin our webinar with a short invocation and prayer, marking St. Anthony's Day tomorrow, the day of the patron saint of our college. And I would like to invite Reverend Father Dr. Joby Joseph, SDB, the rector of St. Anthony's College, to kindly lead us in a word of prayer.
Let's place ourselves in the presence of God as we begin this webinar on changing the role of teachers in the current scenario. We place ourselves in the power, the presence of Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and believing God who is truth, God who is knowledge, God who is wisdom. We listen to a reading from the Holy Scripture from the text of Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 31. Then Jesus said to the people who had believed in him, "If you continue and live in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." God our Father, as we come together on this webinar live on virtual platform, we pray for all our resource persons. We pray for Professor Sharon, Father Paul, Father William Thomas, Professor Nick May, Father Joyce, and the two hosting institutions, Loyola College, William Nagar, St. Anthony's College, Shillong. We pray for ourselves, all in the technical team, and we remember in a very special way the participating audience. We pray for all of us. May this enlighten our minds, may it open with positivity for the future ahead, and as teachers, as people who impart knowledge, may we experience deep in us your peace, your knowledge, your wisdom, that we become bearers of light, bearers of truth, bearers of knowledge to the people that we serve, especially the young. In a very special way, remember today, as we are on the eve of the feast of this college, St. Anthony's, our patron, we ask through his powerful blessing, intercession, to bless all of us, bless that we may always live to the motto of this college, giving light, bringing knowledge, and giving values evermore, better ever. In your precious name, Lord, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father. I now have the privilege of inviting Reverend Dr. Brother Albert L. Nagar, the principal of St. Anthony's College, to kindly deliver the welcome address.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Nathaniel, can I start?
Yes, brother.
I am very delighted to be extending a warm welcome to our eminent panelists, our collaborating partner, all of you esteemed participants and members of the organizing committees and the technical team. We are grateful that we can host another webinar in a span of a few weeks. We began with a look at the broad overview of how education is going to dawn in a changing world filled with challenges and opportunities. And now it is almost as if we have begun to address specific aspects of education by focusing on the changing roles of teachers in the context of the current academic. The virtual conference was for us a launching pad that was given a lot of generous support by participants from across the country who registered for it and also left us many insightful feedback and heartwarming encouragement. We are very grateful to each one of them and to our erudite speakers. Erudite is a good word to use to describe our panelists this evening in every sense of the word. And they needed to be. We are overwhelmed with gratitude to the 5 eminent personalities who are joining us today on this webinar. We have before us a weighty and sensitive theme to address. It encompasses teachers at all levels of education. We often say that without student, teachers are useless. But it is also equally right to say that without teachers, students are meaningless. Teachers, student, and the staff of an educational institution are equally as important to each other as other is. And today we have this platform, opportunity, and resources to delve deeper into the life and work of teachers who form from one important element of the equation. As we have highlighted in the overview of the theme of this webinar, teachers across the globe are now sensing and are being made to sense that there is a need for them to respond proactively to the challenges thrown at students by this pandemic, and that they have to make it a strong and vibrant response so that their students are able to get back on their feet and be given an impetus to move forward. And this is happening at a large scale. Organizations, governments, commercial entities are seen to set their sights on one aspect of teaching or another in the last many weeks, from making online platforms free for conducting online classes to providing free tutorials on how to conduct remote classes to designing lesson online and so on. All these activities are great and wonderful in their own ways, and we hope that many such things continue to crop up in the future. But what we are really concerned here is not just the equipping of teachers with tools to use, but the forming in teachers the right attitude, approach, and acumen that will enable them to evolve, adapt, and overcome their own personal inhibitions and anxieties that will then enable them to take charge of their calling and their tasks before them effectively and with life-changing enthusiasm. It is no longer possible to continue to hold on to the traditional concept of a teacher, and this holds true in every context. Whatever is the concept that you have been holding on till today of a teacher in your specific context, that in some way can be considered as your traditional concept of a teacher, that is going to have to change substantially. If you're going to remain relevant to this present situation, the burden on the feeble teachers shall now increase further. We can consider this an annoyance or an opportunity. To a great extent, teachers have a pivotal role to play in the lives of the young, and they must own this and invest themselves in a new way in this regard. We believe that through this webinar and the excellent lineup of presentations that we shall have, we will be able to achieve a sense of direction and at the same time set the tone for the conversation that will take place on this subject. We have not assigned any specific topics to our speakers, but have left it to their discretion to bring to light what they each see as the key aspect of teaching and of teachers that will change or need to change in order for education to remain meaningful in a COVID-19 afflicted world. While a lot has been said about the need to use technology and the World Wide Web to continue teaching and keep students engaged, these, I believe, are peripheral to the role of a teacher. It is just one way of teaching or imparting knowledge to our students. We have just gone through the physical to the virtual. What I think is actually crucial now is for teachers to understand they will now have to play a bigger role in helping students not only make a sense of what the students are going through, but to find meaning and purpose where the students now find themselves in. So I believe that to do that is to attempt to bridge the gap between the physical world and the philosophical, emotional, and existential issues that haunt our students today. Even as economies around the world are crumbling and societies torn apart by conflict, teachers can still help students find an anchoring that will keep them from being demoralized by the challenges that are already threatening to overwhelm them. I have the privilege of inviting each one of you to engage with these issues and the many others that will be presented to you by our speakers and to begin your own conversation with your colleagues and counterparts so that we can effect a change in way we teach that will be both constructive and concrete for our student. I would like to request every participant to be engaged to listen to our panelists who will share their ideas, their insights. With these few words, I would like to express my appreciation for each one of you who have shown keen interest in our work for being here this evening. My warmest regard to our panelists on this webinar. Thank you so much. God bless each one of you. Evermore, better ever.
Thank you so much, brother. We would like to welcome everybody. And once again, we would like to state the theme of the webinar. It's challenging the changing roles of teachers in a COVID-afflicted world. We have with us 5 distinguished panelists, and I would like to take just a few minutes to briefly introduce them to you before they give their presentations. We would like to introduce Professor R.N. Sharan. Professor R.N. Sharan is Professor of Biochemistry, Molecular Biology and Genetics in the Department of Biochemistry and Director of Design Innovation Center, DIC, Northeastern Hill University, Nehru, which is a central university, Shillong, Meghlaya, India. Reverend Father Dr. Paul Paducherry is the Director of ASHA and has been the head of the Department of Education, Assam Don Bosco University. Reverend Father Joy James has a master's degree in social work from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. He is currently the Secretary of the Jesuit Higher Education Association of South Asia. Then Professor Nikmi Salse Moment is the head of the Department of Education, Northeastern Hill University, Dura campus. And Reverend Father V.M. Thomas is the Director of the Planning and Development, Don Bosco Tech, India, New Delhi. So we have these 5 very erudite, experienced panelists, and we would like to give them an opportunity to share their thoughts with us. And we will begin with Professor R.N. Sharan. Professor R.N. Sharan, over to you, sir.
Good evening, friends and distinguished panelists. Before I start, I definitely like to record my sincere appreciation and thanks to Brother Albert Dakar and also Father George Malikal, who contacted me about it, and I was very happy to join in. This distinguished panel of educators from different parts of the country to share. I mean, COVID, as has been explained, has been a very, very demanding time on all of us in multiple ways, and education has been no exception. So education sector is definitely affected very strongly. There are multiple aspects, and I know that the learned panelists will share their views, different aspects will get highlighted. What I thought that I will share my views based on a little bit of philosophical understanding, my own experience of nearly 4 decades of teaching and learning in the process, and bring out some aspects that I see are important, and see and analyze what COVID-19 pandemic has done to it, posing us opportunities and challenges, as Brother Albert also said. So I will go to, I will share my screen. I want the host to allow me to share my screen so that I can share.
Yes, go ahead, sir. Yes,
Okay.
it's working.
So what I have done, friends, I'm taking advantage of using the title that Brother Albert gave to this important webinar at an appropriate time on the day of foundation of St. Anthony's College that I didn't know. So it's a wonderful feeling for me. What I based my talk is on trying to see how education has, what education is, what teachers should be and are, how education has evolved to shape human destiny? And how have teachers adapted to the demands of time, from ancient to medieval to the modern times? And then, of course, we are faced with pandemic this about 6 months back. So it's very, very recent times. So in this, I look at, as a teacher, an educator, and a student at the same time, that education is a process of facilitating learning, acquiring skills, values, beliefs, and habits in order to acquire education. It's an attribute which is limitless and encompasses everything. And teacher is the facilitator of this process. And therefore, in my perception, teacher has been and should always remain the centerpiece of education. The question then comes, what is this process of imparting education, and which the teacher conducts eventually, so that a child or an adult or even a grown-up, like all of us are students in our own rights, acquire this essential human attributes in form of discipline, of knowledge, of understanding, experience, skill, attitude, and multiple more. So it's an all-encompassing attribute of mankind. And the method of teaching learning includes, but is not limited to, only verbal communication or written communications, or lecturing or sharing experience or training or conducting or directing research, but all of it in multiple ways that we do in everyday life. This clearly means, to me, it means definitely that there are multiple possible ways for imparting education. We cannot be limited. And therefore, in my opinion, not only the formal schooling or higher education or in forms of degrees and certificates that we impart education, we can impart education in multiple ways that we have. The teachers are the real crux of this. And I feel very proud to have been a teacher. And also it brings in a lot of responsibility, because teacher is the controller. So it's a multiple task that teacher has to play in students and in teaching learning process. He is the controller, so he controls the pupil's character and the personality, something that we look up to we have built our society for time immemorial. He is the leader, so role model to influence people's learning process. He is the resource because he provides information in a very well assimilated way. He is a tutor because he imparts guidance to facilitate this assimilation of knowledge. And he is also the assessor who assesses each pupil and shapes his instructions to individual requirement. And therefore, teacher ought to be a perfect organizer who plans out everything for correct delivery of information. And most importantly, teacher is also the participant in teaching learning process, because as a teacher, I learn most and much more than what I did when I was a student myself. Now, if we look at philosophically, and I restrict myself to India, even though the world had education systems which are far older than Indian. So Mesopotamian or Egyptian cultures, we are not going to talk about it. But in India, which is also very proudly one of the most ancient education system, it began something like 1500 BCE, where Aryans, nomads from Central Asia, crossed over to the Hindu Kush mountains and into what was India at that time, and established what is called Indus Valley civilization. They already had a very developed language, which was so developed, and we know that was Sanskrit, that it prevailed over other languages prevailing in this Indus Valley civilization. And as we know that Sanskrit became the mother language of virtually all Southeast Asian languages. And that language, the Sanskrit at that time was Vedic Sanskrit because it was designed so that one can memorize information and assimilate it and pass it on to next generation as knowledge. So one has to clearly distinguish between information and knowledge. And Vedic Sanskrit provided that the Vedas were based on Shrutis, or what we hear. And that attribute you hear and you can easily memorize and process the data. And that's what gurus and the teachers at that time did, because there was no better avenue of passing education from one generation to another except as stories that are told. So it was verbal. The written language came, or scripted language developed some 300 or 400 years after that period. And we know that in Indian scripts, the Rig Veda is one of the oldest written scripts that we have on the planet, and has had multiple avatars of it. It also had, for instance, uh, it has Samveda, Yajurveda, and Atharveda. They're dealing with in politics and the society, the economics, and health. And these Vedic scriptures were based on providing knowledge and disambiguation. So to make everything very obvious. The teachers at that time and the gurus, as they were called, were learned all these, and very rigorously thought about it, meditated over it, and then consolidated the information before they passed on to their pupils. So teacher has been, even from the time that at least Indian education system began, and the same was true for even Mesopotamian or Egyptian education systems that I have not covered because of lack of time. And so teacher has always been pivotal and seminal to education and the inculcation of education. The medieval period saw a change from ancient time to medieval period. There was a lot of change. There was a strong influence of caste that suddenly came into the existence. There was introduction of seclusion, or parda as we call it, an early marriage of women. And they all kind of deprived one section of society from education, that was women. The idol worship started at that time, and that influenced the basic tenets of education. Religion then started influencing the way we educate. Dogmatism came in. Teachers started becoming selective about students. They were not so selective in the beginning, in the ancient time. And the seed of commercialization of education was sown out by those behaviors. The role of teachers also underwent change at medieval time. And if we look at the teachers' evolution through these periods, we see that teachers always conform to what was required. And that makes me very proud to be a teacher. In Indian philosophy, the supreme goal of life was self-realization, and aim of education was to help us attain that fullness of being. The teacher was the medium of education and therefore facilitated that attainment of that fullness of being. And teacher was a real entity. The earliest teacher that we know used to be fathers and mothers at that time, and fathers are referred to always in our scriptures as one who passed information, his own knowledge, his skills to his children, and that propagated through generations. The father as a teacher, though, was doing the job of teacher, but he could not meet the full requirement of education that was envisioned even at that time, and symbolized a limit of education. Then came, but the education has no limits, no boundaries, it's limitless. And then there was a realization that we need a teacher, another teacher than what a father was, because Other teacher is one who may have limitless education, because father not only has to teach but also has to meet the worldly obligations. And this is evident in our Vedic scriptures at that time, and the Vedic way of education and Buddhistic way of education, etc., where the other teacher who was required to make education limitless were the gurus who were able to impart comprehensive information based education, vocation based education, provide personality traits incorporating characters, self-discipline, wisdom, etc. And complete fulfillment of self-realization was then possible. Education, therefore, at that point in time was very different. It was made completely and compulsorily residential, what we called gurukuls at that time, where gurus were teachers who resided there, had nothing to do with the world. There was no parental influence on child's learning behavior. And we have descriptions of those gurukuls, which are the primary schools, or parishads, that they were the higher schools of learning, or higher education centers, where classroom teaching and participatory social learning were integrated part of full education. The education is in essence free, but free did not mean only in terms of money. Each pupil had to participate in daily chores of life as a fee, and they participated. So the gurukul, or the teaching, or the institution where the learning process was imparted, was completely self-sustained, and that gave a very high value based, highly disciplined and orderly living to each pupil, and built a strong character in them, whether it was men or women. Therefore, if we look at teacher, it was responsible, they were responsible for imparting this all-encompassing education to each of their pupil in most curated form of information. So not everyone should be given all information, and it was teacher's responsibility to respond to the pupil's requirement. And so whatever we call it as degree. So if there is economics degree, it is very different from a degree in biochemistry, for instance. So that curation of information was important. Value-based wisdom was provided by societal interaction. So there was discipline, there was acceptance of other views, and character grooming. And all these were very, very important attributes of providing education. And the pupils, because they interacted with teacher face to face, they were very inspired and motivated. So teacher's personality, or the body language, and the itself was a learning process, not only books and the society. So pupils had a value, vision, discipline, and capability to lead the society when they were totally empowered. And then came 21st century. So the end of 20th century and beginning of 21st century already saw a very different kind of education system, where there was an information revolution, informatic revolution. There was globalization and digitization of information. And so information became very, very easily accessible. There was a quantitative overdrive. So everything became magnified. And invariably that led to compromise in the quality of information, and therefore education. There was also very rapid expansion of reach of education. So that brought in commercialization of education. And then the specializations and super specialization increased further. And that, of course, brought in diversification of knowledge, at the same time, conflict of interest. So multiple things happened with the turn of this current century in which we are teaching now. And there was something very powerful that happened at that time in terms of what I called very disruptive technology, and that was birth of social media. So social media came in a very powerful way, and we all experience how strong it has become these days. And our students are no immune to those influences. And so we always see that it's so disruptive that the well-established library culture has become weak. Discipline of students have got a setback. There is a decline in value-based education because social media is invariably, or this entire digitized world is invariably an inherently manipulative technology. It's very, very easy to turn and twist realities and hide facts and show another fact which becomes very real. Information is traveling at a tremendous pace, at unprecedented speeds in these times, globalizing the information. And this is has ushered in a paradigm shift in the way we were imparting knowledge and information to our students. So the e-learning is very different from what was the traditional learning. And since then, at that time, so the beginning of this century onwards, I have particularly noticed that teacher's role is becoming kind of dispensable. The teacher is losing its relevance. The teacher who should be the centerpiece of education is kind of going away, is being dispensed with. And the real teacher is being replaced by what we call a virtual teacher. This information overflow serious implications. The quantitative expansion of education has happened, but qualitative dilution is happening at the same time. The quality of teachers and attributes of teacher is also declining. The attributes that I told you in the beginning, they are becoming weaker. The face-to-face teaching learning process is progressively being replaced by what is called HCI these days, or human computer interaction. Teachers are progressively ceasing to be the role models for students and pupils. There is a decline in value-based teaching learning process. There is over commercialization of education, and meritocracy is fast sliding into mediocrity at all levels. That's leading to societal degradation. So the 20th century had already seen these kind of negative influences on education system, and the perils of this quantitative overdrive and globalized informatics has bombarded everyone with information which lacks quality control. Multiple resources are available, and this is all confusing our students. The teachers are losing their relevance as the drivers of education, which used to be. And the students are confused because they are in a formative ages and they cannot distinguish clearly what is right information to grab and what is wrong information to grab. The teachers are also responsible because they have become a slackened teaching community. And the education is losing its edge as the means of self-realization. So societal and value degradations are becoming fast. And then came COVID pandemic about 6 months back that has changed the world tremendously in every way. And as I said in the beginning, education is no exception. In my considered opinion, this COVID-19 pandemic has simply accelerated the teaching learning transformation that was already in progress with the advent of this century. So suddenly the whole process of digitized education system has become pushed very far. Now every college, every university, every primary, secondary and tertiary schools have to go in last 6 months or less than that, had to become online and virtual teaching. And that brings in huge responsibility on teacher, in my opinion. So before I end, I like to say that what post-COVID-19 pandemic has done to teachers. This period is likely, in my opinion, as I said, it has simply accelerated the changes that were already coming in. So it has accelerated the consolidation of e-learning or the computer-human interaction modes of teaching learning in India and globally in a very short period time, in 3 or 4 months. The role of teacher, therefore, in this position has become even more critical to education and to the teaching learning process. Because I believe that only a good teacher, and good teacher with the attributes that I discussed earlier, can provide good balanced education, because only a teacher who really is himself or herself disciplined can manage this high quality of education in spite of the quantitative expansion and in spite of CHI or computer human interaction. In fact, if anything, an ideal teacher post COVID-19 has dual role and huge responsibility towards its pupil, not only to say what to learn, but also equally to say what not to learn. Because it's very, very important. Otherwise, our teaching learning process will get a setback. I will end here, and I hope I was simply thinking aloud and sharing my view, and I hope that other panelists will add other aspects, and so that we can conclude something at the end. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Sharan, for that very comprehensive look at the role of education and the role of teachers over the years. And you have kind of given us a foundation on which to build our discussions this evening. So we would like to go on now very quickly to Father Paul Puducherry, and I would like to invite him to give us his presentation or his talk. Father Paul?
If I can share the screen.
Yes, Father.
Okay. Set. Good evening to all of you. At the very outset, I would like to congratulate Brother Albert and his team for organizing such a conference. I would like to deal with today the topic on post-COVID-19 education, an emerging pedagogical response from a higher education perspective. Industrialization, diversification, and transformation of professional activities, rural exodus, and migratory flows have generated an emerging dynamics of livelihood across the globe in the recent past, thus resulting in adapted education, primarily responding to the need generated due to rapid technological and communication advancement, while not adequately addressing the issues of environment, economy, health, skills, sustainable livelihood, and migration. The emerging lockdown, the pandemic dynamics, and the ethos of the post-truth era have engendered and adapted living realities, livelihood, economic and industrial standards, governance, political thoughts, and religious adaptations, as they had to encounter ruthless cultural and inhabitation assault created by a volatile geographic partitions and by a society's main economic model based on selfishness, prioritizing the maximization of the economic value over the dignity and intrinsic value of a human person. In this post-COVID world, we need to adapt an education a higher education based on creativity, triggering the best in each student. This requires a new pedagogy because our life are going to be the new normal. So in this context, I would like to ask the questions what you have already seen on the screen. How do we make virtual reality more real? And what are the pedagogical changes that are required in order to bring about a greater learning and understanding? I was just looking at a WhatsApp message was sent to me by a professor friend. This was written by a professor at Houston University. He said, he told his students, I am your professor and not your teacher. He said, teachers are evaluated on the basis of learning outcomes, generally as measured by standardized tests. And if you don't learn, then your teacher is blamed. Now, this is the current reality that we experience. But he went on to say that it is not my job to make you learn at the university or at the college. Learning is your job, the job of the student, and yours alone. My job is to lead you to the fountain of knowledge. Whether you drink deeply or only gargle it entirely is up to you. I think that is the paradigm shift in the teacher. Earlier, the teacher contained knowledge and transmitted knowledge. Today, the teacher has to become a facilitator of learning or a promoter of learning. So in order to achieve that, the teacher has to become a student. A teacher has to move forward, learning or relearning or unlearning the various dimensions that are around. So first of all, the teacher has to look at the first concept, the concept of development. When you talk about a higher education, that is after the age of 18, that's a period 18 to 24 or 25. What do we expect from our students? What do we want them to achieve at the end of the 3-year education? And what sort of skills do they need to have? So in this question, we also need to ask ourselves, how do we create the dimension of socialization? Because socialization becomes very essential. At the lower level, we have a different level of socialization, but then that level of socialization needs to be different. So socialization can be generally defined as a type of social learning that occurs when a person interacts with other individuals. It also refers to a process through which individuals learn to become members of a society by internalizing social norms, values, and expectation, and by appropriately learning cognitive, personal, and social skills as they need to function as productive member of their society. So this dimension has to happen more and more. Earlier, the socialization took to a great extent within the context of a classroom because instruction took place face-to-face. Today, that is going to be today with virtual reality, that there will be a new reality that would be emerging. In this context, we need to ask ourselves, how do we develop the cognitive dimension? Now, if you look at knowledge, so far or until the arrival of the internet, knowledge was institutionalized. When you want to get something, you need to ask a professor or a teacher, or you have to go to a library. Today, knowledge has been deinstitutionalized. You can access information anytime, anywhere, but the whole structure is you need to have the capacity to access information, analyze information, and construct knowledge out of that information, and create multiple choices and choose the best choice that you can. Prior to the arrival of the internet, the authority of knowledge was external. The professors said, the teachers said, my friends said, dad said. But today, the authority of knowledge is internal. Each one has to decide what knowledge do I hold on to. So in this context, the whole issue of moral development comes in. What would be the grounding norm for moral development? Because in the Western context, it has the biblical principles that had grounded the moral development. Now, in a secularized world, what would be the grounding norm for a moral development? How do we accept this as moral and this as immoral? And especially after the post-COVID world. That means we have to create into a new concept to the self. How do I understand myself? Margaret Mead, I and me, who brought out the whole concept of I and me, and many other theorists, which I am not going to speak at this moment. But then the whole idea of self. Today, if you look at many of our college graduates, are finding to understand who they are and what they want to become. And there seems to be a lot of confusion. So that is where we need to come into the next dimension of the social integration. And that social integration allows individual to become what they ought to be, or gives them sufficient room in order to become creative and to become a contributive member of a society, thus adding to nation building. So that will lead to the next question of moving forward. Earlier, the whole idea was to move forward. And now recently, if you look at our own nation, we have been talking about development. We have been talking about skills. We have been talking about creating a transition or having a transition. I think what we are doing is exactly a transition. I think a year ago, probably you would have never ever thought of having a panelist sitting across the country, talking about. So that means we are already transitioning ourselves. Now, during this transition, have we created a new mental framework? Or are we still with the old model of teaching? So the whole question is, this transition has to take place. As Professor Sharon said, there's a lot of pressure on a teacher today because the teacher has to unlearn and has to relearn. And in the process of relearning, this transition is taking place. Now, this transition also brings about the insight that we require at this moment, because none of us are certain what is this new normal going to be. Until recently, we went around, very easily. But today, we have to wear a mask. We have to have the sanitizer in the pocket. As you walk in anywhere, you have to wash your hands. You can't shake hand or hug. I mean, there's a lot of new normal in a physical dimension. The same way, there's going to be a new normal in terms of how we see the world, how we would interact with the world, and also how do we interact with our neighbor. Recently, I am dealing with some of the families and realize, the other is becoming a hell today. Or what is happening in the United States at this moment, or the number of people who died on the railway tracks, or the picture that was on the newspapers recently, the child waking up the mother who is dead at the railway station. All these are questions. And these are inviting us to look into a new insight. I don't know what that insight would be, but I think we are here trying to explore this new insight that would require. That will require what I call a clarification of perception. How do we perceive ourselves, and how do we perceive the other? Also, the whole idea of the perception of the entire world. How do we see the world today? And that's not an easy process, because this perception is not clarified. We are going to have a different attitude. Because once we are able to clarify that we are a member of a global family, that my freedom limits when the other person's nose begins. Learning to respect the other, learning to honor the other, learning to work with the other. That means creating a new attitude within ourselves and attitude elsewhere. Now, that will lead to what I call the interiorization. The interiorization of the self. And that interiorization helps us with the skills. As all of us are aware of the United Nations, the 17 sustainable goals, and all of them would require new skills and new jobs. The post-COVID world, I don't know how the industrial sector is going to be, because so far it was different. After the COVID lockdown is over, probably in 2021, the whole industrial sector would definitely change. That definitely require new skill. That new skill is not there, then they are going to be losers in the world. That is where we are talking about the whole level of creativity, critical thinking, computational thinking, these and communication skills. Today, what is happening with many of us, we may have the knowledge, but many of our students are not able to articulate it. He's not able to use right language. Even though Chomsky talks about language, but then using the language, even today we have limited our time to 20 minutes. Why? Because if it's half an hour, I think by the time when you are over, most of our participants may not be there. So we are also trying to conceptualize and reduce the time so that we are able to communicate that knowledge in a shorter period of time. So that means a teacher has to become a facilitator of learning. And that facilitation will only take place in this model of a network, that we work together, not as individual. Now, this will also bring the whole idea of the 21st century knowledge. That is, it is multidisciplinary. It is not so much, earlier you take history, you have to take history whole your life. And you die in history, and you are trapped in history, and history gets trapped in you. But I think with this situation, we will have to more and more move towards what I call interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary dimension. And it has to become a real reality. Now, this has to be an ongoing, a continuous, going backward and moving forward process. So this is where I would like to, so the whole question is, what's the pedagogy you will adopt to? There is no specific pedagogy. Each teacher or each person, depending on one's own attitude, skills, and subject knowledge, has to adapt a system wherein there's a lot of corporate learning taking place, where there's a lot of cooperation and also probably more project-based learning systems. This is what we are doing at this moment. And this is going to be the order of the new normal, the video conferencing or whatever the virtual platform that we are going to use. So we need to make the virtual reality much more real. As a faculty of a higher education, you are trying to help that student to cross the wall. Support it. How do you support? Not by having stringent rules, but rather allowing a set amount of freedom by transferring the responsibility of the learning to a student, but we will give that helping hand to move forward. Or we might help a little push, as a faculty, give a little push when you need, lift up a little bit. Otherwise, we will have children fighting with each other. Faculty fighting with a student for half a mark, 55 mark, 49 marks, that dimension has to go. And we also come across students who are running hither and there, not really knowing what they want to do in their life. So this is where we see people walking on the thin ice. Now the pedagogy is walking on the thin ice, or what I call able to dance in the rain. We also need to be alert of the media today. Media overnight can make a wonderful professor as a monster. And our legal system sometimes support those kind of things. So how do we handle the required changes that is required in the 21st century? So the pedagogical dimension, the whole question is, how do we transfer knowledge? Earlier, we transferred information. Today, we have to allow our students to construct knowledge. And that knowledge can be different. So we cannot say there's only one knowledge, but the knowledge can have a varied levels and multiple perspectives. Only then we will move into this direction of having a new pedagogy that allows students to make virtual reality much more real. And I think my PowerPoint would definitely explain what I had said earlier. I think that's my time, right?
Thank
Do
you
I
so
have
much.
time?
Thank you so much, Father.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to you all.
Thank you. You have raised very pertinent questions, as well as also relevant issues that we need to address and we need to engage with. And I hope that as we go along this webinar, we will be able to address those issues, or again, take a look at some of the issues that you have raised. We will now very quickly go to Reverend Father Joy James, and we will invite him to come online now.
Thank you. Can I share the screen, please?
Yes, yes, Father, please go ahead.
Can you see it? Can you see the screen?
Not yet, Father.
Not yet.
If you, yeah.
All right.
Yes, it started. Yes, it's started, Father. Yes, it's working now. You can carry on, Father.
So good evening, dear friends. We had two excellent presentations. The first one, Professor Sharon spoke about the history of the education in our country and what happens right now, the transition that has taken place over a period of time. And Father Paul has given us a post-COVID pedagogical paradigm. And he has spoken basically the education as understanding from the insights, then attitudes, then skills, knowledge, and teacher become basically a facilitator to impart this knowledge and disseminate. I'm going to take you to another realm of education. That is a role of the teacher is to promote awareness. As teachers, we are familiar to impart knowledge. That has been our role. And also develop some skills that will suit them, help them to get a job. As we know that all of us, all the students come to the college to get a job, to get a degree, and that become a passport for them. Incidentally, today is the World International Day of the Anti-Child Labor. In our own country, we know that thousands of children are not able to go to school, and they are victims of the child labor. We are all fortunate to have children who are at the university level, higher education level. So what would be the role of the teacher in the
Father, I think Father's connection is off. Sir Jacob,
Yes,
are you able to hear me clearly?
I can hear you. I think we will, maybe we can invite Professor Nigme to come online if she's there. Then we will get back to Father Joy.
Okay, just we'll just wait for Father Joy just for
Okay, fine,
a minute.
fine. All right, in the meantime, what we can do is, I would like to request all participants, if you have questions, you can direct your questions to an email ID that we will be putting up. Please send your questions, please mention the speaker, and please write down the question and send it to education@anthonys.ac.in. I will say that again, please send your emails to education@anthonys.ac.in. That is education@anthonys.ac.in. We will collect all your questions and then we will direct your questions to the respective speakers. And then we will request our distinguished panelists to answer them at their own convenience. So if you have any questions, if you have any queries, if you would like to have clarifications, if you would like to have any kind of explanation or elaboration on what our speakers have said and talked about, you can send your emails to education@anthonys.ac.in. I think we might have Father James back online if he's there. We will request him to continue. Father, please, if you're online, you can continue.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Father.
Yes.
Thank you.
So the awareness is an all-encompassing process that affect our thinking, our feeling, our behavior, attitudes, and values. In the education system, by and large, we are dealing with the cognitive dimension, the knowledge dimension. We manufacture knowledge and distribute this knowledge and sell this knowledge. But awareness is more than just a deeper knowledge, because it affects the entire personality. It not only affects our intellectual dimension, it affects our feeling dimension. It affects our behavior dimension. And basically the psychology talks about these three dimensions: the cognitive dimension, the affective dimension, and the cognitive dimension, the willing dimension, the behavior part. So all these five aspects we understand, then that is the awareness. That's why we say awareness is healing. Knowledge will not heal us. It often disturbs us. When we have a problem, when we think about that, it disturbs us. Whereas awareness, if we become deeply aware of that, then it becomes healing. And what is the process involved in this awareness building? It is basically start with experience. We all have our experience, happy experience, painful experience. Most of us live with this painful memories of our experience, but we don't critically reflect at the experience itself. What we are asking in the critical reflection is why this has happened to me. Not that what happened, when it happened, where it happened, how it happened. These are all descriptive data. The moment you ask the question why, then we get an insight into our personality. So it is basically awareness is an insight into the personality, not an information about the personality. And that is the critical reflection. And this critical reflection leads us to the awareness. It's a deeper level of awareness. It is not something that we talk about a naive or sensational. It is something that affects us. And this leads to a creative action. If you want to have a change in oneself or the other, we need to develop awareness. The amount of information is not going to change. And this creative action will lead us change, because basically all of us want to be happy, and peaceful. And peace and happiness can happen only this process, no other way. Of course, we all know as teachers, there are three types of teachers. The first type of teachers are ordinary teachers. They will help the students to write the exam, get through it. And most students like them because they are the one who help them to get through. There are good teachers. When they teach a subject, they will relate to life. And the students are able to see the life as it progresses. And there are excellent teachers who are the one who inspire the students. I am talking about the type of teachers that are excellent teachers who help the students to discover themselves, not only themselves and the world around them. And that's the process where we talk about the awareness. There are three types of awareness possible for human beings. First is a self-awareness about oneself. It is to know about oneself. It is not to know about ourselves. Because sometimes people say self-awareness means knowing one's ability, the weaknesses, the problems. These are information, self-information. Awareness is something that I know and I know why of it, then insight into the problem. That is called awareness. So there is a social awareness, self-awareness first, then social awareness. It is not information about the reality around us. All of us know during the lockdown period, we have seen that thousands and thousands of migrants walked. 198 of them died on the road. These are facts, information that may not change people. But why this has happened and historical reasons, the current reason, economic reasons, the social reason, the political reason, the cultural reasons, then we get insight to the dynamics of the society. That alone will impel us for a change process. And that is social awareness. Then also we have about God awareness or value awareness. Sometimes people may not believe in a God, personal God, but even they have a sense of value. The human dignity, justice, and the freedom of expression and dignity of human beings, all these are great values that we have imbibed. Our preamble of our constitution itself has enshrined all these values. And how do we go through this? I want to talk to you about the self-awareness. There are certain components. First of all, we must have an awareness about body, not information about the body. What happens to the body? Do I experience a sensation of the body? When I sit in the chair, my body touches, the clothes touches me, my feet touches me. I experience the cool air coming in and the warmth of the air that goes out when I exhale. All these are part of the body sensation, body awareness. Second is the thoughts. The cognitive dimension of personality, the thinking part of the personality. When we say thinking, people understand that it's always a very conscious activity. Often it is not. Sometimes we are very conscious. Sometimes we are in the fantasy world. So we have a conscious thinking and a fantasy thinking. That is why when we hear something or when we see something, immediately our mind goes on something. Some thinking process takes place. So if you want to develop an awareness, we have to be in touch with not only the conscious thinking, even the fantasy thinking that happens to us. And as we take the class in the university, most of our students, because of that age, they are in a fantasy world. They may listen to us, but their mind is somewhere else. Their thinking is somewhere else. This is a thought. Then the emotions. What are the emotions, predominant emotions that we experience? Most people in Asian context are not in touch with the emotions. They are very cognitive people. They think, they talk about thinking, not the emotions. See, what are the emotions this time, the COVID period, the lockdown period we are experiencing? Basically, many of us are afraid, the fear. Fear envelops us. The anxiety envelops us. Most of our students are going through that process. Do we have an effective mechanism to deal with that, to understand that, to identify that, to respond to that, to proact with that? This is important. A teacher is the one who is able to do this. And he has to develop that skills and insights and the processes. That is an important thing. And the third dimension of behavior. What is the behavior? Behavior are not always conscious. There are conscious behavior. When I deliberately, consciously do things. But most of our behavior comes from the reflex, the habits. We have been practicing this, and the prejudices, the culture that we have imbibed, our childhood experiences, the do's and don'ts that our parents have told us, all that affect our behavioral pattern. So if we get insights with our thinking process, both conscious and fantasy, emotions that are conscious and not so conscious, and finally the behavior that is the conscious behavior and the reflex behavior. When we talk about the emotion itself, there are only basically 4 emotions. That is a glad feeling, sad feeling, scared feeling, and also the fear of anxieties and the guilt feeling. All these are different type of feeling. So the anger part. So the happy feeling and sorrowful feelings are somehow we are able to manage. But when we deal with the feelings of fear or anger, and most people are not learned how to deal with these emotions. And most situations people deny the fact that when we experience fear, we become incapacitated and we are not able to normally behave. And this behavior pattern leads us to guilt consciousness. So that's the way we look at that. Then how do we deal with that? We need to have some relaxation exercise, and students have to practice maybe yoga, breathing exercise, pranayama. All these become part of the breathing, the relaxation exercises. Writing diaries, write down, reflect on that, share with people, interact with people, and certain amount of self-disclosure. That is why in the higher education field, it is very important to have a basic counseling skills for all the teachers. And we are mentors. We are not just teachers who impart knowledge. We are the people who are helping people to discover themselves and make them to commit themselves to the society and to transform the society. And this transformation can take place only I become a changed person, when I develop insight into myself and the society. And how do we see ourselves? This is an important thing. Our self-image is how we see ourselves rather than a reflection on how others see us. It radically affects our self-esteem. Self-esteem is a concept that affects our understanding of self. A negative self-image can be a crippling handicap. It can inhibit. It can lead us a problematic. It is in our ability to relate to other people. On the other hand, a healthy self-image can help us to develop a harmonious relationship. It is a precious commodity. Self-esteem is a concept that people with a very good self-esteem see themselves as being liked, being wanted, worthy, acceptable, and being capable of understanding. Although very difficult to change, your self-esteem can be altered in a variety of ways so that it can be consolidated into a healthy reflection of our true self. If we do not need to remain trapped in a prison of negative self-image, the belief that change is possible and a little determination will set us on our way to improving our self-image and maintaining a healthy self-esteem. So self-esteem is an important part of human development. And we know that in our higher education field, people have very high cognitive ability. They get very high marks. They also develop sophisticated social skills and also technical skills. But often their self-esteem is low. And what happens in relationship? They are not able to work in a team. They become highly competitive. And cutthroat competition affects our social life. And ultimately, many of the young people become frustrated because they have not developed this skill of understanding deeply themselves, accept themselves, and to transform themselves. There is a test. If you do not feel about yourself, what happens? It is difficult to make contact with other people. It is very difficult and more energy and time consuming to make decisions that are right for us. It is also difficult to bring these decisions into practice because people, those who have no good self-esteem, will not be able to make decisions. And if at all they make decisions, they will not be able to practice it. It is difficult to hear the messages telling that other people love and appreciate us. And a person with a low self-esteem will always spend a lot of time being anxious and worried about what other people think of us. So persons who have a low self-esteem always suffer, despite the fact that he has a very high quality of intellectual understanding and a lot of skills, but yet the person is not able to develop himself fully and be happy and peaceful. Finally, if you feel good about yourself, what happens? You feel energetic and alive all the time. You feel that you can solve the problems when they arise, and you are confident that you can do your best. You have so much more to give to other people and much more free with the appreciation of others. A person with good self-esteem can easily appreciate. That's why I said it's very important that as teachers, we must develop very high self-esteem, definitely above the average, so that we are able to understand the students, appreciate them, support them, be with them when they are in their struggles. You are more open to feedback and suggestions from others and more willing to accept criticism and suggestions for change. As teachers, we have to get feedback. It's a teaching learning process. A teacher has to learn. And it's not the one that teacher knows everything and the students know nothing. This is a learning process where the teacher has to learn, students have to learn. And both of them have to do a constant search for truth. And there is a research part. And finally, also an extension activities, where what we know, what we understand, the insight we have imbibed, that has to go outside to transform the world and especially to help the less fortunate ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father. You have taken us on a very different trajectory in our line of thinking. And you have also given us some very practical insights on how we as teachers can further develop ourselves. We will come back to you when we come towards the end of our presentation. So now I would like to invite Professor Nikme Salse-Momin to kindly come online and give her presentation.
Yes. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear you, Professor.
Yeah, very good evening, Professor Sheila and the entire team of St. Anthony's College. At this very onset, I would like to place my gratitude to all the panelists before me who had spoken wonderfully. And I should be telling that Father Joey had opened a way for me and it's making my work much, much easier. Thank you, Father James. I would also like to thank Father Joby, Father Sunny, Father Thomas, Father Dushri, and Professor Sharon here for being with me, and the entire team members and the technical members. At this onset, I would like to say that coronavirus-related disruption has given educators to rethink the sector. As of now, we can see that for a while, educational leaders, policy makers, the decision takers have been talking about the need to redesign and replan as how we educate the future generation. I would like to here say that we did not choose to have our schools closed and universities closed. Our carefully constructed routines, our calendars halted in their tracks. our seminars, conferences, workshops, our field trips, our sporting events, our internal examinations, our finals, our many activities in the university got cancelled. We didn't expect it, and we had a very little warning about it. We weren't ready for the change, or were we? Now, meanwhile, as we as educators are indeed shaping, molding, and honing our content knowledge, our pedagogical skills, and more so, the techno-pedagogical skills amidst all this, I would like to draw in the attention to the inner person of each of us, the emotions. And because of this, I have entitled my presentation as COVID-19 Pandemic, an emotional event for educators. Now, why is COVID-19 pandemic an emotional event? It is an emotional event because we all educators know that relationships come first. It is an emotional event because we as educators are presently oversaturated and overwhelmed with endless streams of death news, losses, informations, directives, resources, in most cases, which actually narrow down our hope. We're also emotional presently because of the inequities that has got exacerbated, and the work that we are to be doing may not work tomorrow. Neighborhoods and homes have become schools. Systems change is not guaranteed. Everyone is rapidly adapting in this moment, but ensuring the equitable change sticks of the policies by actors is still a big question. So I would like to bring in 4 points. The last point being the concern and the influence, something very close to our heart, and the social emotional learning in the era of COVID-19 and why emotions of educators matter as we rethink education in this COVID-afflicted world of today. But I would like to affirm, yes, that there was life before COVID-19 and there will be life after COVID-19. The point 1 herein is to rethink about education. Now, in the midst of COVID-19 crisis, we are sure of the need to prepare our students for future. According to Dell Technologies report, 85% of the jobs in 2030 that Generation Z and Alpha will enter have not been invented yet. And according to the World Economic Forum report, 65% of primary school children of today will be working in a job types that do not exist yet. So COVID-19 crisis may well change our world and our entire global outlook. And it is teaching us to be prepared for what the future might hold, maybe perhaps a little earlier. And herein we are learning lessons that COVID-19 is a pandemic that illustrates how globally connected and interconnected we are. And we as teachers need to be collaborators. And secondly, when students access to knowledge and learn a technical skills through a few clicks on their phones, tablets, and computers, teachers need to redefine their roles and their functions. Thirdly, this is the area of my concern for today, because in this ever-changing global environment, young people require resilience and adaptability skills that are essential to navigate effectively through the pandemic and beyond. This group of people are expected to be creative, communicative, and collaborative. And needless to say, in the 4th point is that COVID-19 pandemic compelled us to utilize the suite of available technological tools and unlock them with greater flexibilities to deliver education across the world. Now, my concern is, most importantly, our hope for Generation Z, Generation Alpha and beyond is the importance of human needs for the face-to-face social interaction that has been taught to them amidst experiences of isolation, amidst remote learning experiences, and of course, amidst the experiences of being away from peers, being away from teachers and classrooms. Now, few researchers have revealed that during the COVID-19 phases of pandemic lockdown, educators have certain stress-related feelings. And these stress-related feelings are different from what they have experienced before the pandemic. Now, why is this feelings different? The feelings proved to be different according to the research findings, because in the first instance, due to the personal or general fear that they or someone in the family would contract COVID-19, the new coronavirus. The second point of difference, because of the due stress of managing the needs of the self and the family that gets extended to community needs, while simultaneously working full-time from home, adapting to new technologies for teaching. Now, in point 2, I would like to draw in your attention that the research studies centered to emotional intelligence asserts the importance of emotions. We can see the emojis here. Emojis are pictures worth 1,000 words. They speak a lot for us. They say in the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence that emotions of educators during the COVID-19 outbreak was not very positive, as Father Joey was speaking ahead of me. The emotions of the educators matter. And why? So because of the 5 reasons that has been given in the research findings. Positive emotions harness attention and promote greater engagement, while negative emotions, they disrupt concentration and interfere with thinking, adversely affecting educators and their work. Secondly, emotions matter for decision-making, because when we are overwhelmed, when we are oversaturated, when we are frustrated, we get stressed, and the areas of our brains react unfavorably towards decision-making, and that gets very unpleasant. In the third case, emotions are very important for relationship, because how we feel and how we interpret the feelings of others leads to building positive relationships or otherwise. It is very important in the 4th place for health and well-being, because of our ability to regulate pleasant emotions that resonates health benefits, fostering greater resilience during and after traumatic events. Fifthly, emotions are important for performance. Chronic stress among teachers results in demotivation and disengagement, leading to burnout. So we can see that the importance of emotions are held high. As educational psychologists, we have so many questions at this point of time and thousands of concerns for everyone's emotional state. The questions I brought forth is, how will students and educators cope with life being turned upside down so quickly? How will we support students who rely on schools for meals, for mental stability, and the oneness that their classroom provides? How will our students without access to computer or technology continue to learn? And what will we do in our school, our colleges, and our campus communities? How will this impact our institutional funding, our careers, our economy? And then there's the uncertainty around that when teachers and students will be allowed to return to schools, colleges, and universities. What will our schools and colleges and universities will be then like? This is the question. It's not a holiday break. Things are not waiting for us. It's a crisis. That's why I have come up with an answer so that it can support us as educators. It can support our students in getting through these difficult times. We can look to the social and emotional learning, in short, the SEL, for evidence-based practices to help us now and to support us when we eventually return to our school, our colleges, and our universities. Now, what is social emotional learning? Social emotional learning is a life skill consisting of 5 basic core competencies. I'll be dealing with the self-awareness today with reference to the circles of concern and the circles of influence. But this life skills will be catering to the classrooms when it comes to curriculum and instructions, and then it will cater to the schools at large with school-wide practices and policies, and home and communities will be catered through family and community partnerships. Recognizing your emotions and leveraging the science of social emotional learning is the most important thing right now, as affirmed by the World Health Organization just in the 1st of June 2020. SEL, or the social educational learning skills, are real skills for the post-COVID era. Now, social emotional learning is a teaching of an interrelated set of cognitive, affective, and behavioral competencies that can help us navigate the uncharted territory in our socially distant world. Social educational learning can help us control the imprint it leaves on the mental health and the well-being. And fourthly, finally, I would like to draw in your attention to emotional intelligence. Now, when we are in a world turned on its head, thinking about things that we can do with our knowledge, we are now having the opportunity to leverage the power of emotional intelligence to keep our feet on the ground and our minds directed towards building the future that we want for our students, for ourselves, and our society. We can't control what has happened, but we can control how we respond to what is happening. Now give yourself and everyone around you the permission to feel all emotions, the emotions that we have: fear, anxiety, the guilt. Now it all starts with self and ends with self for others. So we all have so many things in our life that challenges us, whether it's people, situations, or environment we live in. At times we spend a very, very disproportionate amount of time thinking and acting on things that are fundamentally outside of our control. This element of human nature can be very frustrating. You can ask yourself, it can be very stressful, distracting, and damaging. That's why Stephen Covey has come up with the paradigm long before COVID-19, and we can apply it today. We can apply it in our circles of concern. Circles of concern basically means everything in a wide range of concerns in the world. It matters you, but they are outside of your control. We will be seeing what are included in the circle of concern. And comes next the circle of influence. These are the things that we care about and we can impact. These are the internal factors, the inner man being activated, whereas circle of concerns are the external factors, something that we do not have control over. Now let us look at circle of concern and circle of influence as a strategy of social emotional learning that I'm introducing today. Stephen Covey theorized that many people who experience change or who react to change or who they choose to respond to change are those who effectively embrace change. They focus their time on things they actually have control over instead of wasting their time and energy on things they do not have. Stephen Covey paradigm is widely in use, and we can very well apply today in the COVID-afflicted world and in the post-COVID era of tomorrow. Now we can look at things that are in the circle of concern, something like the news that we listen to every day, the economy, the natural disasters, weather, world peace, pandemic, the internet connectivity when it comes to places like Tura and other rural or suburban places, then the lives of politicians, other people's opinions, their thoughts, their behaviors, their expectations, the gossips of your colleagues, the gossips of your friends, your birthplace, your past mistakes, educational policies, parents' salaries, the COVID-19 of today. Yes, they are all our concerns. But do we have any control over each of them? We don't. We don't have any control over the news, the economy, the natural disaster. We had watched Cyclone Amphan destroying right before our eyes just a few days back, but we could not just do anything about it. Now, next comes the circle of influence. Circle of influence consists of two circles. That is circle of direct control and circle of indirect control. In the circle of indirect control, we can see that there is our ability to influence. Now, as educators, I would like to say that we have something that needs to be focusing on for life. So focus on life, your family, your health, your career, your commitments, your efficiency, your competencies, your productivity, others. You can focus on your regular content, pedagogical competencies, techno-pedagogical skills today because of the need for digital education system. You can influence your student, your class, your education, your system, your society, your community, your nation. It can extend up to the world. And the second circle of influence is the circle of direct control. Now watch this. It's very personal. Your thoughts, your attitudes, your values, your principles, your behavior, your learning, your responses, your reactions, your choices. You have direct control over the things of your emotions. Now, what are you focused on is my question today. Is it the COVID-19 pandemic and its tragedies, or the positive parts, or is it the decisions of our government? What are you concerned about? Or what can you have influence upon? What can you control directly? Now, Stephen Covey has suggested that to become productive in the society, in the world where we live in, we can adopt proactive focus. Now, how does that happen? If you are focusing on your circle of control, it adds to your feelings of stress. It adds to your feelings of helplessness because you cannot change anything in the circle of concern. And reactive focus means that if you focus the majority of your time on your concerns and problems, you neglect the issues within your control, and your circle of influence, which consists the circle of direct and indirect control, shrinks. It is very small. Its strength is very weak. And so the change of focus is required for us today as educators of the COVID pandemic and the post-COVID era. Proactive focus means we can devote our time and energy to changing what you can control. Your circle of influence expands and life will improve as a whole. You start living your life with a purpose. You become positive. You become productive. So indeed, before the pandemic, teachers were already burnt out, added in new expectations of becoming digitally expert to support uninterrupted learnings for our own students and caring for the ever-evolving demands of their families and communities. We're so for working women like us. But it's no surprise that 95% of feelings educators reported recently are rooted in anxiety. We can't control what is happening to us and around us, but we can respond to it. Education is always evolving. It is always evolving consistently with a society in a flux. Transformation in learning and pedagogy is imperative, it is necessary. Herein we may think about the things I cannot control. Things that I cannot control are coronavirus, the news, the stock market, how my colleagues or other people behave, how the government decides. But one thing for sure is about things that I can control. Staying positive, staying home, being aware of important news, my behaviors, my thoughts, my responses, my attitude, my commitments. So I would like to draw in here a need for us all, amidst endless rapid changes that awake diverse emotions, from happiness to fear, from joy to anger, from enthusiasm to apathy, from vigor to dullness. The simple strategies of social emotional learning can be adapted, and we can address the mental and the psychological needs of educators and influence the ways they interact with the world, not only today, but also tomorrow in the post-COVID-19 era, and when we will be teaching, or we will be educating, or we will be learning together with the children of the millennials, the Generation Z, the Generation Alpha, and beyond. You know, the Generation Alpha, beginners, now they are still in the pre-primary education. We will be preparing them for a job still not known. It was good learning with you together and being with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Nigme. You have touched upon the concerns and anxiety of many teachers and students, and you have also been able to highlight some very practical ways of addressing those concerns and those anxiety. We will now go over to Reverend Father V.M. Thomas, who has been waiting very patiently. And Father, without further ado, can you please come online?
Thank you so much. Good evening, friends. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, Father.
Yeah. Am I there?
You can go ahead, Father.
Okay. Thank you so much. You know, these days, Oil India is on the news quite a bit all across the country, because maybe for the wrong reasons. But there is a saying in the oil companies: when you have struck oil, stop boring. I know nobody's smiling. Anyway, I don't want to bore you much longer because you have had so many rich inputs. There has been so much of knowledge sharing. There has been very, very practical concepts as well as ideas that have been put forward during these past, almost 2 hours now. Therefore, I really don't want to present a paper. I would be a bit more informal, I thought. And I will just share my thoughts, maybe the way forward. I remember seeing a cartoon just a couple of days ago of two youngsters talking to each other, saying, you know, some time back, the teachers used to be insisting with us saying, future is in your hands. But today, the teachers are telling you, wash your hands often. Are they telling us to wash away our future? Or are they washing off their hands about our future? I think this is a matter of very deep concern. Are we washing off our hands or washing away their future? This is a deep concern. And I think all of us have touched on those concerns. And Professor Nickme spoke so much about that emotional social learning and all that kind of a new behavior that we need to adopt. I think it is so very critically important. I would just like to share maybe a couple of thoughts. Locks always come with keys. And I would say lockdown also comes with keys. And it's wonderful to see how we are exploring new keys in education, the new way forward. And that is so insightful and so powerful, as I think it is Professor Sharon who spoke again and again about accelerated learning. I think we are, fortunately, COVID-19 has taught us to make changes much faster. I know, being in education for quite some time in school and associated with colleges, we have been requesting teachers to adopt, I would say, technology. And it was so difficult for teachers to persuade them to use technology. Now the question is, will the present day stage, when there's so much urgent need of technology, first of all, will teachers be redundant? I would say no. But I would say teachers who do not use technology will be replaced. I hope no teachers will feel offended when I say this. If teachers do not learn to use technology in our modern times, they would have to be replaced. There's no choice. We are in a time of digital learning, distance learning, online, and I think we need to get into this act. Maybe I will share the screen right now. And let me see, I hope I get into. I think the whole question is, are we willing to step outside our comfort zone? We are doing it. I congratulate Brother Albert, Father Sunny, and your team. You're doing things which you never did before. You're stepping out of your comfort zone. You're beginning to do things which we never ever imagined. And we are beginning to explore things. And I think this is exactly where magic happens. Magic is happening before us. I could never imagine Tura, Shillong, this William Nagar, and Guwahati, we have to all be connected. And so powerfully, so beautifully, we are getting to learn from each other. We have been so far operating in this comfort zone. And happy to be there, doing the way we did, lecturing away. Maybe a time has come, things have to change. The best thing I feel about the COVID, perhaps I know nothing good about it, but I would say this: teaching, we wanted to make learning student-centric. And here is the opportune time. It is moving student-centric. It has been so much of teacher-centric education, but we can truly see things has to become student-centric. Look at this lecture. What is retention of learning? 5%. Look at reading, which we teachers do very often. The retention is merely 10%. And in the recent years, most of our schools and colleges, we have been using audiovisual aids. But even when we use audiovisual aids, it is merely 20% retention after 24 hours. Demonstration perhaps a bit better, discussion is still better. But look at this, practice by doing. When students are themselves doing things, the retention is 75%. And when they research and when they begin to teach others, the retention is much higher, 90%. You know how fast acceleration, Professor Sharon, we have reached here. So fast we are reaching here. All this while for years and years, we are stuck with this. And now in 3 months' time, we are already talking of participatory methods. Students have been compelled to involve themselves in learning. My dear friends, teachers and professors and our friends, I think high time must come to move from passive teaching methods to participatory student-centric methods, which is already happening. And that, I think, is the future. Chinese, I know you don't like the Chinese, but they said, what you hear, you forget. What you see, you remember. And what you do, you know. And I think this is what Benjamin Franklin also said, tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn. And that's what's going on right now. Learning because students are directly involved. All of us teachers who have done B.Ed will remember the Bloom's digital economy, taxonomy, not the economy, sorry, taxonomy. You know, in our early time, our whole emphasis in education was to teach them facts. Professor Sharan, I salute you for your wonderful analysis and the comprehensive presentation of education in India. I hope you share the presentation at one point of time. And so we understand the change, but all that was emphasized initial stages was remembering. And in the more recent times, we took to some idea of understanding the learning or whatever that we speak about. Very rarely we taught application of knowledge. That is so ridiculous. That's why, I don't know, I'm sorry to quote this. One of the studies of Harvard University says we produce half-baked graduates in India. Half-baked graduates. It is surprising that 80%, 70 to 80% of our engineers are unemployable. I have had some very unfortunate experiences simply because we are not taught them how to apply. Not capable of analysis or evaluating. Right now, all our learned speakers before me have been speaking about creating. How do you create new knowledge? I think this is absolutely required. Professor Nickme and others, Nickme in particular, quoted about this generation Z will get into jobs that do not exist today. Again, 50% of the jobs of today will be automated in maybe 5 to 10 years' time. And again, jobs are changing. You know, the youngsters of today, generation Z, will at least be employed in 10 to 15 jobs in their lifetime. They are not going to enter one job and stay with that job. It is there that they need to create every day new solutions. Are we teaching them? That's why Bloom has come out with something very beautiful. All this is lower level thinking. But look at this. How to do with the digital tools. Look at this. I don't want to get into all these details, but you just see the activities with the digital tools. And we are already here. That's fantastic to see how we are getting into these tasks already at this point of time. So congratulations. Maybe I did thank COVID that has accelerated change for us, at least in education. Though it is a pandemic, it is It has brought about a disruptive crisis, but I think God has, maybe in every adversity, there is an opportunity. And I think this is the opportunity. What has already been said, 95% of our teachers feel Generation Z students will one day have careers that do not exist today. And that's a reality. And what should we do, therefore? Very well said by all, right from Professor Sharon on, reimagine and invent teaching. And Father Paul, I don't see him on the screen. I guess he is with some emergency, but he will very well agree that what he has spoken about very graphically about reinventing, reimagining education. I don't want to go into details of this because it take too long. I think my time is running out. I don't know when I am informal, maybe. But look at this on the left. This was a style in which we operated. Teacher as authority. We spoke about it. Now teacher is a facilitator. Expert, a guide. The student is exploring knowledge. Earlier, student merely receives knowledge, but today it's got choices. Flexible activities. Professor Sharon again spoke about those multiple ways of learning, multiple ways of teaching. I think that's where we have to talk about completely a different style where we bring in openness and trust, not control. We have to forget this. Can we forget this and get into the post-COVID education, student-centered education? We've been talking about this for ages, but today there's no choice. Fortunately, there's no choice. If you want to reach youngsters, it's only through this methodology. Here it is. You have seen them. This is what they're about. This is the new generation we are dealing with. We have been talking about the generation, the millennials, Generation Z, born between 1996 and 2014. And now we have the Generation Alpha, as Professor Nickby spoke out, who are just into the primary schools. Now, what are they about? These are the characteristics of our Generation Z. Look at them. I mean, I don't need to talk too much, but they are visual. They need connection. They are mobile. They are independent. They are smart. They are adopters. They are influencers. I think let's take advantage of their character. The first generation to grow up in an on-demand world. The frequency they look at, I just want to, sorry, 1 minute, I will just want to say that 78% of them, they check their mobile soon after they wake up. How much of time do they spend on their social media? It's unbelievable. There's a goldfish has got only 3 seconds. Generation Z, can you guess? 8 seconds. That's a memory time. So dear friends, our lectures won't work with Generation Z. 8-second attention span. That's what Generation Z has. 50% of them have not entered a bank branch in last 3 months. I don't want to get, actually there are wonderful qualities with Generation Z, which I didn't know before till I began to explore and study about Generation Z. It is not post-COVID, it is pre-COVID, but it's wonderful to see how, for example, Father James was speaking about awareness. Youngsters have got terrific awareness about the human impact, how they need to be, and they're concerned about, we think they are pessimistic, by and large, at least the pre-COVID analysis, they were optimistic about future. They are willing to change their future. I don't want to go into this, but I think you'll know this. They are social, multitaskers, entrepreneurs, educated, philanthropists. 93% say that an organization's impact on society affects their decision to work there. They prefer to work in an organization which has got a social impact, not that one in which they selfishly they get funds. How to effectively, I think, is creating new teaching learning opportunities. Dear friends, I think Professor Jacob, you can show me a hand when you, if I'm getting to time. I know you need time. Shall I go for how many minutes? Okay, I'll get, you've got 3-4 minutes for me. So I will, I just want to say what methods to be better prepare Generation Z for the future workforce. Hands-on learning, evolving teacher curriculum, letting students follow their curiosities. Now, these are teachers who are now studied, and they find that teachers and students are agreeing that both of them want to emphasize on creativity in their classrooms. This is let me not, both of them, the teachers and students are agreeing on certain things. They learn in these ways: watching, researching online, collaborating, listening, reading. Okay. Students want to own reading. So I don't know where the place for much of lecture in these situations. Generation Z was born to share. Generation Z will research everything. They need high octane engagement, continuous engagement. 8 seconds, dear friends, 8 seconds attention span. That's it. Maybe this is more true of students abroad than India, but believe me, in my own, when I was in US many years ago, I could not engage them for 2 minutes. It was 20 years ago. Today, you can't engage a teenager in an adult classroom for more than, I would say, more than a minute. That's the reality. They are visual creatures. Is it Generation Z is a visual creature? Do we recognize this? Or are we still going on and are we willing to use technology, incorporate social media? Many of the speakers spoke about social media. Now, it's a time for us. It's nothing bad about them. That's what they need. We need to incorporate social media. Teacher as a curriculum designer is a designer of the knowledge that encourages critical thinking. Let me not elaborate, but let me say this: create a safe environment for them to learn. Follow the students' thinking. Don't just give them answers. We don't need to give them answers. Let them find their answers. Probably we are too busy giving solutions to their problems. Those solutions, those problems will not exist. There will be new problems. Encourage collaborative thinking. Extremely important. Teach questions rather than the answer. Teach interconnectedness. One thing that pandemic has taught us is that we are interconnected. Whether we are in Tura or in Shillong or in Guwahati or in Bangalore or Delhi or any part of the world, we are interconnected. We are in this together. Teach for multiple perspectives that Professor Sharon spoke about it, and use language, the varieties that we have been talking about. What are we therefore preparing the students for? We already mentioned this. The question is, are we making the students less intelligent? Just recently, I was passing through the street of Guwahati, and I found a youngster, about 17, 18-year-old. He said, he had a T-shirt that was on him. He said, I was born intelligent, but education spoiled me. I think, I don't know. Are we guilty? Are we destroying the minds of our children? I think that's a critical question we need to ask. Sorry. I don't think I have the time now. Marks are most important thing in life. Is it true? What is the truth about this? Work hard, get good marks, get a degree, and you'll get a job. This is a myth. It's no more true. We need to do something more and different, make them learn, youngsters today, to access knowledge, manage knowledge, utilize knowledge, apply knowledge for the realities. And they have to learn to become creative. Maybe we'll do some simulation. Pilots don't fly the aircraft on day one. They work on simulators. Maybe you have to present those occasions to youngsters in the colleges or at home, and they learn on simulators, and then they will actually fly. Let me stop here, and I would say finally, make our students robot proof, because robots are going to replace, but make them robot proof by making them capable of inventing, discovering creative mindset. And then we shall truly see a bright generation. Probably this COVID has got its own, will create a better future. We cannot give them a future, but dear friends, teachers who do a great job in colleges and universities, we can form them for a future which is unknown, but with our new way of reaching out to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Father. You have focused on some very interesting points, and you have also given us a very interesting look at how we can prepare our students for the future. So we have a few minutes on our hands right now. We are going to have a brief interactive session where the panelists will have a few minutes to add to what they have said earlier, or to highlight something that you found interesting in the presentations of other panelists. So we'll take about 1 or 2 minutes just to say a few words on what we would maybe something that would like to add to what we have said earlier, or to other panelists' presentations. So I would like to invite our panelists, Professor Sharan, who's been with us for the last 2 hours. You've been here waiting and you've listened to everybody speak. Professor Nigme, Father Joy, Father Paul Puducherry, I hope he's still there. And Father Vian Thomas, perhaps some quick reactions and some responses from each one of you.
It's wonderful. I mean, I am really educated myself, and I learned a lot, particularly from Father Paul Puducherry, on how to construct knowledge. The point that Father Joy James made on how to enhance self-esteem, and I think it's a very, very pertinent point. A lot of students face this, and I would certainly maybe later and connect with you one-to-one to learn a little more about it, so that I can use it in my own teaching and learning process. Professor Momin is my colleague from NEHU, and it was wonderful to speak to her, listen to her, and learn something about particularly the circle of concerns and circle of influences, and how we can perhaps control what we can control and not worry about what we cannot. And of course, this concept that Father Thomas gave was wonderful, and I think all of us, particularly me as a teacher, I go back today more educated, and I hope I will become a little more useful to students in my own domain. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sharan. Anybody else would like to add a few words or would like to make some comments?
No, it was a very interesting session. All the panelists, spoke on very different aspects, and we are all concerned about the higher education. Particularly that this higher education, the place that we create new knowledge, and new models are created, and transform the society needs a new knowledge, new skills, new attitudes, new way of behaving. And this happens only when we have an integral development of personality. So we should not so much only on looking on the cognitive dimension, but the affective dimension, the behavioral dimension, particularly on the social commitment, because we are a privileged group and millions of people are not able to come to the university level. And we have a responsibility to transform this society into a humane society. Therefore, a holistic understanding of human person and a critical understanding of society is important. So I'm grateful to you, especially to both of you, the Loyola College and the St. Anthony's College. I know Brother Albert so well. He has been very good to us. And I particularly thank all of you and his colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Joy. Anybody else? Maybe Professor Nigme, Father Thomas, or Father Paul Puducherry, if he's here.
I just want to add on to what Father Joyce said that we are to create a humane society. I think in colleges or in schools, we are trying to create what I would say good or whatever human doings, not good human beings. I think can we create good human beings and not emphasize merely human doings? And I had, let us not create educated monsters. What we are seeing around today, people are educated, but they are inhuman. Or we see pictures that we see, what Father Joy just spoke about. We are privileged class. What about the millions, the 500 million or more people who never come to college or universities? We have seen the pictures on our televisions. We don't want a Hitler who killed 6 million Jews, nor do we want a Stalin and a Mussolini or a Mao who tried to destroy the Chinese culture. So what are we doing? Can we change our attitude in education to create good human beings? And for this, let me conclude by saying a teacher teaches himself. A teacher teaches herself. A teacher is a medium. We are the medium, and we are also the message. When you talk about the Gurukul system, it can again be practiced today, maybe in a bigger perspective, but we are the medium, we are the message. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father. Professor Nigme, any responses, any reaction from you? Oh, Professor Sharan has something to say.
Just a brief one. I mean, of course, absolutely fine, and we have to adapt to new times. But my concern in my limited experience has been also qualitative downgradation of teaching as a profession and colleagues in teaching. And I think while we allow our self-adaptation to the new technologies and demand, all of us have to be very conscious about how to maintain, because as you said, we are the drivers, we are the facilitators. And if we are not good drivers, if you have bad drivers on the street, there will be accidents. And if we are not good facilitators, we are, playing with the lives. And so there is some concern that I have that technology, it can be very, very disruptive to society as well.
Thank you very much. Very pertinent thoughts there. Professor Nigme, anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, I'm very thankful to be amongst the very well-learned panelists here, the veterans. I've learned a lot, and I should be reminded that teachers are the builders of the society. And the fact is that we as teachers start from who we are, and the relationship of the self is very important. That's why I tackle it with it. But nonetheless, it is the environment. The relationship of every teacher with the environment is the first and the foremost. If we are not able to take our stance and be grounded, no matter in what conditions or generations we are there for teaching or educating, we are to prepare ourselves. And very pertinent messages have been informed by Professor Sharan, the philosophy of education, and the CHI, with the artificial intelligence having its own way right now in our life, and Father Thomas's version of the characteristics of the people we are dealing with, the one we are living for, the one we are working for. Their characteristics are superb. They're very creative. And I see it in my own house with my children. And they say they're born with mobiles, they're born with laptops, and their life is very different. And when you look at society of tomorrow, sometimes it's very difficult for us to really understand who we are. But today I should be very thankful that I have understood many things that I have actually not known. And so I thank you, Brother Albert, for inviting me. I thank you, Father Sunny, and for all the organizing team members and the technical team members for easing things out for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So it looks like Father Paul Puducherry has been called away on an urgent matter, so we will not have any reaction or responses from him. So we've had some very stimulating and enlightening presentations and interaction this evening. But I'm afraid we have run out of time. We have to conclude our webinar at this point, but we hope that the conversation that we have started here will continue on. I will now invite Sister Helen, OSF, Vice Principal of Loyola College, William Nagar, to kindly propose the vote of thanks. So Loyola College is our collaborating partner in this webinar, and we have Sister Helen to propose the vote of thanks. So we would like to thank all our participants for sending their feedbacks. We will send you your certificates as soon as this webinar is over. Give us a few hours. It might take maybe 2 to 3 hours to send all the certificates. And so if you do not get your certificates by tomorrow morning, please check if your email ID is a correct one. And if you have, please let us know. If it is not correct, please send us a correct one so that we can send you your email. So over to Sister Helen for the vote of thanks.
Good evening. I have the joy of thanking you on behalf of the organizers of the webinar, St. Anthony's College, Shillong, PG Department of Education, and Loyola College, William Nagar, and the entire supporting technical team. I remember our God Almighty gratefully and extend our sincere gratitude to all our speakers, Professor R.N. Sharan, Professor of Biochemistry, Molecular Biology and Genetics, and Director of Design Innovation Center of Northeastern Hill University, Dr. Paul Puducherry, Director of ASHA and former Head Department of Education of Assam Don Bosco University, Father Joy James S.J., Secretary of Jesuit Higher Education Association of South Asia, Professor Mrs. Nikme S.C. Momin, Head of the Department of Education, Northeastern Hill University, Tura Campus, and Reverend Father V.M. Thomas, Director, Planning and Development of Don Bosco Technique, New Delhi, for sharing your rich insights on the changing role of teachers in a world that is afflicted by COVID-19 pandemic that is confronting us with many historic challenges that will require patience and perseverance to overcome. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for our speakers for suggesting a variety of responses teachers can take advantage of, and the integration of a blend of online and in-person teaching pedagogy. My sincere gratitude to all the participants of this webinar nationwide, without whom this webinar would not have been interactive and participatory. Your attentiveness, your valuable comments and queries were very reassuring and relevant. I would like to take this opportunity to place on record our hearty thanks to the technical team for the perfect logistic support to make this webinar possible, to reach out to the participants in different parts of the country. Thank you for your enormous cooperation in the organization of the webinar. As COVID-19 continues to challenge us, the safety of students, faculty, staff, and visitors would remain a top priority for teachers and educational institutions. Thank you, speakers, for making us confident to meet the challenges of the times and helping us find our way to a firmer ground. Thank you. Good evening.
So with that, we've come to the end of our webinar. Thank you all so much. We have had a wonderful time of learning. It was wonderful to see all the threads coming together, all the 5 beautiful threads into a beautiful tapestry. So thank you so much. God bless and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Wish you happy feast of St. Anthony's tomorrow.
Same to you, Father.
Thank you. And all the best to you.
Thank you.
Nice meeting all of you.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
See you sometime again.
Sure.
Surely.
Father.
Bye.
Bye.
Signing off from St. Anthony's College, thanking everyone.
Thank you, Father.